note, we're going to go straight to our interview here in-house to commemorate and to look at the significance of Mandamano from 1990 onwards. We're joined by Dr. Kenneth Ombongi. He's a chairman of the Department of History and Archaeology at the University of Nairobi. Dr. Ari, good to see you. Welcome to Sunday Live.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Olive.
So Olive and I were arguing, and she won the argument. It was 34 years ago.
Yes, of course, 34 years ago.
That's settled.
Yeah.
But okay, is there a feeling of deja vu all over again when you look at the events of 34 years ago, even though they were different in many ways? But is there sort of a sense of deja vu?
Oh, well, not quite exactly, Chef. If you're well versed with the history of this country, we are generally children of resistance. From 1895, when the British established the colonial state here, our forebears said no, and they resisted. The British clamped down on them, but it did not stop there. The riots you're seeing in Nairobi are actually not new. If I take you back to 1922, on what then was Kingsway Road, now Harituku Road.
By Norfolk.
By the Norfolk. Yes. The Kingsway police station, which is now Central Police, our people were killed in front of that gate because they were protesting the arrest of Harituku, who had started the usual thing that we know better, resisting. Rebels with a cause. Fast forward after the Second World War, many Africans who were conscripted by the British and went to war came back, and they discovered very quickly that the British were as mortal as them because they saw them die in the war front. And they said, enough is enough, we need our freedom. And that forms the basis of what we call the Mau Mau movement. Of course, fast forward to independence in 1963, we gain independence. We still continue with the resistance. 69 is very familiar with you, and the killings in Kisumu, right? Let's come very fast forward to Moi coming in. It just begins with the resistance from the coup in 1982, then transforms President Moi a little bit. It becomes a bit more dictatorial. But the movement that we now call the Second Liberation begins for pluralism. Kenya becomes a single-party state officially in 1982 in a motion that was moved instantly in Parliament by a former President Mwai Kibaki, who popularly said trying to cut down KANU is like using a laser blade to cut a mugumo tree. But finally, in the 90s, children of resistance, there they were. Section 2A in 1991, December, was scrapped, and Kenya became a politically open society that we are today. So what you see in our streets, what you see in our villages, the sad situations, are much in tandem with what we have had in our historical patterns and political development. The major difference is basically a few circumstances and the participants in it. But even then, the variations are not very big. Look at the 90s, what you are calling the young people now. The 1990s had the young people. You've shown Governor Orengo here. There's Paul Mwite, Gitobu Manyara, Raila Odinga. These were the young Turks of the 90s. The only difference with then is that they were led by fairly elderly politicians, Masinde Murilo, Kenneth Mathiba, Charles Rupia, and Jaramogi Odinga, the father to our former Prime Minister. But the element and contribution of the youth in trying to transform this society and make it better has been a characteristic of the years. University of Nairobi students have been part of this over the years, and many of those leaders who were student leaders in the university have come on to play a leading role. Orengo is one of such leaders. The only difference with what we have now, and probably this is what our leaders who are in authority now needs to recognize, is that we are dealing with a slightly different generation. This is a generation that is not armed with stones and twigs. This is a generation that is armed with much more lethal weapons than the police batons and rubber bullets and even real bullets. This gadget, a phone, a bottle of water, a mask. Now they have added toothpaste. They are more lethal than we want to appreciate.
Yeah.
And on that note, I was reading an article that was published in 2020 by Charles Onyango Obo. You're familiar with him?
Yes, yes.
And he said the fact that Saba and other democracy movements did achieve only measured reforms from power and not a new order is not a failure. In Kenya, they could not have achieved more, and in fact, even that little is a lot. This half-a-loaf outcome for years of brave, democratic and radical activism, he says, he is due to a number of things, but essentially at the end of this article where he talks about, and this was in 2020, so these protests had not yet taken place, he says, that, sorry, just a quick, let me pull it up, that the Kenya democracy movement has something good about it, but it also means it would only always settle. It has been big on ideas and is very human rightist. And the issue he takes with this is that they were necessary and made a difference, and their apex during the Daniel Arap Moi and Kanu had rule, like great acts of subversion. But as a well-aging Kenyan leftist told me once, in the end, they were telling us to wear our Sunday best to mass, not calling on us to burn down or overthrow the church.
Onyango Obo is a good historian. He appreciates one fact that the Kenyan state is a project in progress incrementally. Every time we have achieved something towards transforming our society, and it starts way back. When our forebears fought the British in those first years between 1895 and 1914, they achieved something because they demonstrated to the British that you cannot walk in, and have it as if it was a picnic, taking our land and taking our freedom. The British probably could have thought that it ended. Then in the 1920s, it emerges again. We achieved some level of freedom. This led to what is called the Devonshire White Paper of 1923, that for the first time talked about the paramountcy of African interest in the Kenya colony and protectorate. That was a step forward. Then we came to the post-World War period, then the agitation for freedom begins. It began with trying to tell the British, we need these freedoms, we need to abolish racial segregation in our urban centers, we need our land. When they refused, it emerged from being fairly persuasion and trying to talk into very radical and militant Mau Mau movement, until the British had no choice but to pack up and go. And even from 1963, the story has just been the same. Every time we achieve something small in the creation of what we could call the Kenyan polity, and always we are guided by these aspirations of a better society, the hope that tomorrow will be better than today. And that is what really our children are looking for. And indeed, they are our children.
Yeah. Speaking of which, when you looked at the concert today at Uhuru Park, what went through your mind? Is this a new dawn? Is this...
And do you mind if I ask a quick follow-up before he gets to the new dawn? You talked about Mau Mau.
Yes.
And what... Obo points out in the article is, as heroic as it was, Mau Mau was a land restoration uprising seeking to win back the soil that had been expropriated by the colonial state and settlers. It was not a land rights movement seeking redistribution to all. This do the right thing but don't overhaul feature has become well settled in the DNA of Kenyan activism. So even as he asks about the new dawn, yes, how much should we manage our expectations?
Well, there's that element if you look at the historical pattern that we have had. But I doubt whether the current generation that we are dealing with have that understanding. I highly doubt. I have teenagers in my own house, and I listen to them. And between me and them, we are miles apart. You know, we are measured. We want things to evolve, but they want them now, here, and today. There is a way in which we have led down this generation, and that brings me to the question that the Chief asked about Uhuru Park. I looked at and watched the commemoration today. It said a number of things. One is, you know, the people who are agitating now are not violent. Violence is actually external to them. Children armed with water and a phone, which just turned out to be now a little weapon. They're not violent. Violence comes from elsewhere. That is the elsewhere, in my view, that we need to manage and listen to this generation in ways that are not informed with the biases and the baggage that we have from our history. Because that is, actually, even when you listen to the prescriptions our leaders are making, you clearly see that they're coming with the baggage of history. You know, we have let down this generation in a number of aspects. Look at the challenges that our education system is going through. I've spent all my working life of over 2 decades now in the education sector. And you could clearly see that we are actually moving from worst to worst by the day. And our children are seeing it. And the kind of solutions we are prescribing don't seem to meet the standards that they expect. If you listen to the conversation that they had with the president the other day, you could hear it. And they have no qualms. They tell the president the way it is. Those of us who grew up in the Moi time, you know, almost my heart jumped out of my chest when I had a young person really saying things to President Ruto that I have never imagined that a president can be told. That tells you something. That's number one. They are not violent. Number two is that this is a new dawn. And how do we handle? Because the old ways of doing things are not going to provide a solution to the challenges these people are facing. It doesn't matter how many police officers you unleash on them. It doesn't matter how many rubber bullets that you use. I don't foresee them relenting. Let's sit down, take a step back, and listen to them. I highly doubt whether we have listened. We listen and hear what we want to hear, in my view.
Real quick, you just compared Moi to Ruto.
Yeah.
In not so many words.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, in some ways. Yes.
In some ways.
Yes.
Is this going to, how do you think it's going to last? How do you think it's going to pan out going forward? Because one side has to give.
Of course. One interesting thing is when you look at the presidency from the Kenyatta administration, and I have a privilege.
Kenyatta 1 or Kenyatta 2?
Kenyatta 1. I have a privilege that Professor Kawanja and I have started a project on presidential history in Africa generally, and we are beginning with Moi here in Kenya. Kenyatta comes in, that's Kenyatta 1, an elder statesman, laid back, and because of the respect of age and gray hair that we have, and the country was trying to struggle with unfolding from tradition to modernity. Kenyatta had a privilege that very few people, probably his contemporaries like Jaramogi, will stand up to him and say, "Mzee, this is wrong." And in a number of ways, they did it with some level of respect that an elder statesman needed. Kenyatta was a great chief, if you looked at it. Then here comes President Moi, much more younger. He dilutes us and says, I'll follow Nyayo. I'll follow the footsteps of Mzee. But he creates his own administration, revolving around his own fears as an individual. And also the need to tame the Kikuyu and the Luo elites that were around him. So phobia was really the determining factor of the direction that Moi took. Phobia of the Kalenjin elite groups struggling for influence within their community and the Moi presidency, and then phobia of the Kikuyu and the Luo kind of opposition to his presidency. That's why our president was virtually everywhere. He was professor number one, teacher number one, Mukulima number one. And the Kano became, Mama na Baba. Now, Kibaki comes in, and Kibaki tries very hard to mimic the Kenyatta administration. Laid back. Kibaki will keep quiet and know everybody. Annoyingly silent.
Yes.
He made the politicians who had made a career for bashing the Kenyan establishment, they had no space. They died naturally because there was nobody to bash. Kibaki will give you an opportunity to say everything and anything, and he will say nothing. And even when he opened his mouth, he used a strategy we call in historical discourse meaningful ambiguity. Iko nini, tunaenda, tunarudi, tunakuja. So he mimicked Kenyatta one, stay back, give your bureaucrats a chance to do their work, but when they go wrong, let them carry their cross. He sacrificed his very close friends. Minister Mweralia died with a case of corruption. I mean, this is in public domain. His close friends, Materi Kirili and all that, if you handle public affairs in your own way, carry on close. Now, quick forward comes President Ruto, who actually, just like many others, was a student of the Moi administration. He was a scion of the Moi administration. And perhaps if somebody asked me, the greatest challenge that President Ruto has right now is to extricate himself, is to separate himself from the many political lessons that he learned from President Moi. Wonderful man, very, very sophisticated, and very smart. But then he had his own challenges. So we cannot use the tricks of the time to handle the kind of generation that I'm not able to handle myself, even in my own house. I keep quiet and say, now tell me. Yeah. So there are those, contradictions and very interesting, movements in our own political developments. But the point is, we have reached what I see, and with the benefit of looking back, as a critical moment when certain decisions need to be made that will transform this country for the better, much more than we have done before.
Absolutely.
That's a good note on which to
move on. Dr. Kenneth Mbongi, good to see you. We can listen to you all day long. I love the history lessons.
Well, that's what we do for a living.
Maybe I'll come and attend one of your classes.
Please do. Please do. Please do. We begin in actually September, the first week. Yeah. We have regular weekly seminars, which you can attend. They are both online and on site. Okay. You're welcome. So the excuse that you cannot cross over to the university will be just that, an excuse. So you can do it online. And we begin with the first one. And it's on national TV.
Yeah. Be careful what you wish for. I might just show up.
Please come.
Dr. Kenneth Mbongi, he's the chairman of the Department of History and Archaeology at the University of Nairobi.